Let's start. Welcome to everybody and welcome to everybody online as well. It's really my great pleasure to welcome Professor Jane Clarke from Cambridge University to give the LMB's 2025 talk on the occasion of the International Women's Day, which, as you probably all know, was on Saturday, the 8th of March. So, as many people, young people would think that sort of Women's Day is probably part of the modern culture wars and something quite controversial. This actually goes back to 1909 when it was first mentioned, and it was part of a very significant part of the women's rights movement of the early 20th century. And it's actually a holiday in many countries, not in the UK. And it is endorsed by the UN as an international event. It is connected with matters such as the right of women to vote, also called women's suffrage, wider gender equality, and reproductive rights, and the fight against abuse against women. There have been some major successes also connected with this day, which, for example, led to the event that all women in the UK could vote since 1928. That work was not finished then. For example, Cambridge University, just to mention that, it was the last university in the UK to give degrees to women in the late 1940s. And even more closer than that, the LMB has some issues in the space, as you all know. Just to give one example, although we have 50% female and male PhD students at the postdoc level, that drops to 35% female, and then at the group leader level, it's 25 for all of them and about 17% for tenured group leaders. That's quite shocking. I take personal responsibility for that. We are working really hard on that, and Louise, as the EDI manager here and champion, is sort of helping a lot to change that. These are deep-rooted problems, but as a director and as a human being, I see this as a very important problem, because this is about fairness. This is about giving everybody the same chance, but it's also about diversity, in the sense that we want to use all those highly trained brains when they're available, and I think doing that properly is very important. So it's very fitting that we have Jane here today to deliver her talk about her career. So I will sort of not rattle through your career too much. You will tell your own story. Jane is no stranger to the LMB. She did her PhD at the age of 40 with Alan Fersht, who's actually come in today to listen, and did that after she's done many years of teaching in a school. She's a mouse spectroscopist by training, which she learned in the CPE, which used to be right next to the LMB on the old site, and then became a research fellow after that. She's a fellow of the National Academy of Medical Sciences and a fellow of the Royal Society, and she was elected fellow of the American Biophysical Society as well. She's a distinguished biophysicist, and her studies have greatly advanced the understanding of protein folding and misfolding. Jane retired in 2017 from active research mostly, and was then President of Wolfson College until last year, I believe. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you for having me, and it's lovely being here. Sort of, this is the new LMB. I remember the old LMB, and we all have quite fond memories of that old LMB here. So I want to talk a little bit about my career, and just thank you for coming, because what I want to say is, I think my main message is there's more than one way of skinning a cat, and there's more than one way of having a career. And I think the more we embrace that, the more diverse we will allow science to become. So it's a story of how I got here, who helped me along the way, and the heroes and mentors of my career, if you like, and what lessons I learned. And it's an alternative career profile, and I'm going to talk to you through the steps of my career. But of course, you don't live your life like that. All along this career, I was living a life. And it's really important, if we talk about what we do in our careers, we recognize that we're people, we're complete entire people. And I think the story of how these fit in is an important thing. And when I was trying to thinking about this talk, I wanted to sort of show it in a slightly different way. And when I turned 70, my daughter gave me this picture. It's a big poster of my life. So I show you snippets of what my daughter thought my life was like, just to liven it up. And this was, the first 70 years of Professor Jane Clarke, BSc, PG over there. That's my grandmother, who used to love all my letters, and she got more and more blind, and she used to write all these things on the envelope when she sent me a birthday card. So that's my grandmother being proud of me. So what happens? Well, first of all, I was born 1950. You could do the maths. In 1950, and I think where you come from and your background plays a huge role in who you become. My family, there's my parents getting married. They come from the valleys, so I'm South Wales. Both my grandfathers were miners. Left school at 13 to go down the mines. But they believed in education, so that they gave their children an education so that we could get away. And there's me being born and then growing up in Cambridge with my mother, who was a school teacher, and my father, who left school at 16 but liked music and going to France. That's what this picture's for. And so my first heroes and mentors are really my family. In particular, my mother, who brought me up to give me a good education. They believe education was the gift you gave your children so that your children could be who they wanted to be. And my father, my family brought me up to believe I could be or do anything. And it was quite weird. When I went to university, I discovered there weren't any boys doing science. I was quite surprised, because I went to a girls' school with these wonderful women who taught me, but all these old women, I thought they were old. They're now all much younger than me. But these are the people that inspired me and gave me the opportunity and made me want to do science. My mother was a scientist. These women, Miss Smith, Miss Allsop, they made me want to do science and become scientists. So having a good start and an opportunity for a good education is something that I'm really passionate about and that I've always wanted to do. So I do my A-levels. I didn't get into Cambridge. I'm a failure. I failed at the first step of trying to get into Cambridge. And I went to York University and I did biochemistry. There's me at York doing biochemistry, according to my daughter. But it was good because I met my husband at a Who concert. So he plays a role in this at York University. But what was I going to do with my job? Well, I was going to be a teacher. Just think about it. These were my heroines. My mother, who was a school teacher, my school teachers who had inspired me. So I always planned to be a school teacher. So I did a postgraduate education and I became a school teacher, and I taught in comprehensive schools. My communist relatives would have killed me if I taught in private schools. And this is me teaching in Tottenham in the 1950s in a school right next to the Spurs football ground. And I loved it. I absolutely loved teaching. But of course, meanwhile, you can't just do that. I had two children, Hannah and David. I don't know why Hannah chose a picture of me dropping her on her head when the washing machine broke in that picture, but obviously she thinks it's memorable. And I went to work part-time because in those days you couldn't work full-time. You couldn't, it was hard to work full-time. So I went to work full-time and I was happy. I was head of science in Tottenham. And then my husband came home one day and he said, oh, the bank wants me to go and work in America. So we up sticks and we head off to Atlanta, Georgia. And it turns out that I wasn't very good at staying at home. And so I decided to do a part-time degree just to update my science. So that when I came back to the UK, I couldn't teach there. I didn't have the right qualifications. I would be updated in my science because I was going to be head of a school. I was going to change the world. And here comes the second person who was influential in my mind. His name was Bud Sudduth. I was at Georgia Tech, and he introduced proteins to me. He did a course on proteins, and I just fell in love with doing research. I fell in love with proteins. I thought I was fascinated. What was the relationship between protein sequence, protein structure, and protein function? And so I knew that I'd found a new passion, and that's what I wanted to do. So we come back to the UK, and I decided it was time to do a PhD. So I knew I wanted to work on the relationship between protein sequence, protein structure, protein function. So where do you go to study proteins? When you go to the biochemistry department. So I went to the biochemistry department and I saw everybody in the biochemistry department, and they said, very interesting. You're 40 years old, you've got 2 children, go away, don't bother us. You know, it's not for you. Who'd look after your children? None of your business who'd look after your children. It's not really possible to do a science degree while you've got children, childcare. But going back to things, that protein chemist had given me a letter for somebody who just moved from Imperial to Cambridge, and that was Alan Fersht, who was the top protein chemist in the world. And I went to see Alan. I kind of cold called him, remember? And he kind of said, okay, starting October, your stipend will pay for your childcare. And it was extraordinary. Alan, I wish you weren't here, because I'm going to say what he was an extraordinary supervisor. Not once ever did he say, it's 3 o'clock, why are you leaving? He never cared the hours you did, he only cared what you achieved. And it was, you know, I'll be forever grateful to him for that. But meanwhile, my darling mother died just before I started. She knew I was going to do it, but she never saw me do it. But of course, I now become the carer for my dad as well, or the person that has to look after my dad as well. So I get my PhD, and oh, here we go, Alan. There's my inspirational role number there, without whom I would not be here. So I get my PhD. I get an MRC training fellowship to do biological NMR, still in Alan's lab. And then I got a Wellcome Trust Career Development Fellowship to move back into the chemistry department. I moved into the chemistry department and started my career there as a group leader there. And again, I mean, you'll find out that I only had 20 years as a group leader. I started in 97, and I had to give up in 17 because I was 67. So it was a short career. But again, Alan's support there was incredible, because when I started my group, he gave me some space in his old lab in chemistry, and then gradually moved out and left all his kit for me to use. So starting a group and not needing to buy equipment and things was so important. That's why I think you don't know how lucky you are in the LMB, having core facilities. You know, if you move into a chemistry department, you've got to buy all the spectrometers and the centrifuges and everything. You have no core equipment. And that was really important to me. Meanwhile, of course, my family is still around. My daughter left home, then my son left home. At one point, my daughter was ill, and she couldn't be left alone. And so I had to go and work go and look after her for weeks at a time in Edinburgh, where she lived. My research level went up because my research group were there supporting me, helping me, keeping on the research. I think we don't appreciate enough the group working in a lab, so that if you've got a weakness at one point, the others are all there to surround and help you and support you. I think the support of our colleagues is underestimated. But also they start to have children. I've now got 5 grandchildren. Here are some of them being born here. I retired, I turned 60. My husband, I became Professor, Fellow of the Royal Society. And one of the important things that I learned along the way here is the importance of supportive people around you. I've talked about having a supportive mentor, but actually those people around me in my sphere, my own research group, who I'll show you next, but also brilliant women, mainly women, also men, who traveled the journey with me. They were postdocs when I was a postdoc. They became early group leaders when I did. These incredible women, Carol Robinson, who was the first woman professor of chemistry in Cambridge ever. When I joined chemistry in Cambridge in 1997, there had never been a woman professor of chemistry in Cambridge. Never. Carol was the first, I was the third. But she came to Cambridge and we've been close friends ever since. Sheena Radford, who was with Chris Dobson and his group and Alan's group used to get together for meetings, and I met her through those. And Susan Marquisy in Berkeley. These are amazing women biophysicists, protein biophysicists. Every time they used to publish a paper, I think, rats, I wish I'd published that. But every time I had a problem, they had a problem, we were supportive, they were always there for me, and I've always been there for them. Susan now heads up biology in the NSF in the States, and she called me from Berkeley saying, Jen, I've got this offer of a job, should I do it? She's not having a very good time at the moment, you can imagine. And so we've had some conversations on the phone about what's life like being, you know, a science leader in the States at the moment. They're rivals, they're collaborators, they're mentors. To all the young women in this audience, I would say, find those people and travel the journey with them. But the other thing I want to say is the amazing science. I've only realized how much I miss it since I've stopped doing science. Science is such an amazingly collaborative thing. These are the amazing young people that are in my research group. This is a poster. One of these is a poster that they made to run my symposium, and you know, you can see. What we have to do as senior scientists is to support and nurture our research teams and ensure they research and nurture each other. You know, we were talking just now, Jan and I, about the kind of rivalry, the sort of, you know, can I be better with this thing? Actually, to my mind, you do better science if you do collaborative work. In my research group here, I have physicists, oh, well, I'll show you later. Anyway. Then, of course, I have to retire. In Cambridge University, you had to retire until last year at 67. It's now 69. That's a good thing. I voted for it. I voted for it again. Alan voted for it and will vote for it again. Because, quite frankly, I've never met a researcher who thinks they're past it. I have met quite a lot of researchers who I think are past it, but let's not go there. But they all will tell you that they're doing the best of the work they've ever done. Alan will tell you the best work he ever did was P53 work he was doing when he retired, probably. I don't know. But we all think that. But where are these young people? Where are you going to find jobs if we don't make people retire? Very fortunately, I got the position of President of Wolfson College, Cambridge. And so real retirement just happened last October. I'm not enjoying it yet. I'll have to work on that. So these are other things. This is my daughter thinking what I've done. I'm working on equality and diversity in science, she put in there, because it's something I've always thought of importance. Going on lovely holidays. That's me and Sheena Radford having a drink from a coconut in India. Having Christmas with my family and doing science with my grandchildren. Be curious, always ask why. Bringing up the next generation of scientists. So reflecting on this, what have I learned? Highs and lows. What were the highs? Well, I put loved. I should put loved, not love. I love being a research scientist. Every day, I mean, you know, it's just so creative. It's so new. It's so exciting. And you know what? Life's too short to do something you don't love. If you ever find yourself doing something you don't love, please stop it. Because really, life goes through so quickly. I spend all day, every day with some of the brightest young people in the world. Academia was actually a great job to combine with parenthood, it turns out. Now, when I was a teacher and my daughter was third shepherd from the right in the nativity play, I could never go and see her. But when I started as a research scientist, I could take time off. You go to work late because your child's doing the nativity, the assembly. It's so flexible. I found friends and mentors across the world, and I've also learned that a supportive family is very important. You should choose your partner in life and your children very carefully. Make sure your children aren't too sick all the time. Make sure your partner in life, well, I also often say marry a banker, because if I hadn't married a banker, I couldn't have afforded to give up my work and switch careers in the way I did. But to have his support to do these things has been really important. Of course, there are challenges, uncertainty in your career path. This is always held up as a barrier. And it's always been held up as one of the things that works against diversity in science. People with uncertain financial backgrounds find uncertainty in careers more difficult. Women apparently find uncertainty in careers harder. I don't know why they do that. Women's lives are uncertain all the time. We deal with that. But yeah, you know this. If you're a postdoc, you know it. If you're a scientist, you know it. Rejection. We were just saying about this. You get rejected all the time. You just have to learn to be rejected. Cry, stamp, kick, complain about reviewer number 3, and then get on with it. Go and prove they're wrong. If I hadn't been able to deal with rejection, I wouldn't be here. Because those people in biochemistry said, you're too old, you can't do it. I'd be a school teacher again. Having ambition. Sarah Tightman said once that somebody said to her, your trouble, Sarah, is you're too ambitious. I don't think anybody would say that to a bloke, would they? Getting that life-work balance right. Guilt. Why aren't you a proper mummy? David said that to me once when I came home from work. Why aren't you a proper mummy? Why aren't I a proper mummy, David? Well, Debbie makes cakes. Buy cake. But you have to actually learn that you have to accept being good enough is okay. You will never be, if you're my sort of person, the sort of scientist that expects their group to be in the lab till midnight every night, in the lab every Saturday and Sunday. No. Saturdays and Sundays were for my kids. Alan always cared for his kids, always took time out to be with his kids. It's a model that you should follow. But you have to accept that you'll never be the best at everything. Your child will not win the homemade fancy dress competition. That's great. They'll learn about rejection from the start. And actually loneliness. When I was in the chemistry department, I started in the chemistry department. There were only 3. I was one of only 3 women group leaders. I was the only mother. Do you know what? I don't think there's a mother. I don't think there is another mother in the chemistry department at the moment. With a group leader mother there. Now? All that time later? It's a bit hard sometimes. That's why Carol and I enjoyed each other, because we could talk to each other about difficulty to be a mother. Where did you get your nails done? That sort of thing. It can be lonely if you're the only woman in the room. So let's reflect a bit about why I love my job. Think about research. I looked it up because that's what we do nowadays. So what is research? Blah, blah, blah. This is quite a good one, the bottom one, but actually I prefer this one. If we knew what it was doing, we wouldn't be called research, would it? In other words, research is a leap into the unknown. If we confine ourselves to being right all the time, if we care about whether we're going to be wrong, we'll only ever do research which is safe. And actually, somehow, we need to make ourselves brave enough to be proved wrong. One of my best days in a you know, one of my best days at work is a memory, sort of sitting in my office. Basil comes in and he says, Jane, I've got these results. I don't understand them. You know, got a graph here. It should go through the origin and it doesn't. Well, you've clearly messed up. You're going to do it again. 4 weeks later, done it all again, Jane, and it's still not right. You know, it's still not doing this. Okay, you've really screwed up. Now you go and reclone the protein, throw away all the chemicals you've got, remake all your buffers, do it all again. 3 months later, he comes in, we get exactly the same wrong graph. We've discovered something new. We've discovered that intrinsically disordered proteins care about the iron type in their buffer, which actually is really profound when we went into there. But it's something new. It's a scary place, and we've got to be prepared to do it. But also, I think fundamentally, and I think we're under pressure at the moment in this country, certainly in the States, research and the value of research is being challenged. And I think we have to, as researchers, stand up and shout about how important it is. Research is really essential. And if you think about the problems of humanity that humanity is facing now, we need research to combat all these things. But we need to be clear and to shout about why it's important that we're doing it. But of course, if we're doing something unknown, we need to have diverse research teams. We need to have people coming from different aspects, different ways of looking at a problem, if we're going to get difficult answers. And I was lucky enough to have very diverse research teams. I had chemists, biochemists, physicists, computer scientists, and even the odd engineer. Because today's research is really strongly at its best when it's multidisciplinary. I have course, and it's international. And again, this is under threat at the moment. I have quite a lot of researchers from the UK, from Europe, in and out of the EU, from North America, South America, Africa, Asia, and Australia, Oceania. And even I had collaborators working in the Antarctic because we did some work on the biology of Antarctic fish. So our research and our researchers covered all 7 continents. Because actually we'll never do great research unless we're international. But of course, everything's not well in the research world. We talked about this. This is the Royal Society of Chemistry report that was about 5 years old now. But you know, the number of women doing chemistry, almost 50%. The teachers are doing a good thing. The teachers are sending almost half our undergrads that are women. So the school teachers are going to do a good job. It's higher education and research institutes that are doing a bad job. Look at the numbers. And of course, this is the missing element. This is also from the Royal Society of Chemistry. The pattern is worse for racial and ethnic minorities within the UK. Nobody's done a report, which I'd love to see, about socioeconomic background and the scientists that we get. The Royal Society did some work on this, and people who are first into university will tend to be doing science in the useful sciences. So they'll be doing pharmacology or nursing, or they're not doing the pure chemistry, the biochemistry, the things, the physics. It'd be interesting to do that. So who's to blame? It might be that people have argued that it's the unalterable nature of science that means that men are better at it. White men are better at it. I refuse to give that thing. Is it the women? Well, there are people who think it is the women. Do you remember this, Tim Hunt? I mean, it's only 20. It's okay. It's only 10 years ago. Tim Hunt said this. The trouble with girls in your lab is you fall in love with them, they fall in love with you, and when you criticize them, they cry. How many of you remember this? Coming out, yeah. The women of the world. Because they don't have, of course, they don't have a sense of humour, women. That's the problem with them. They came out with all these things. I gave a talk in Singapore once and I got given a badge saying, warning, no crying in the lab. They came out with an appropriate one-fingered response to this. But nonetheless, People believe this. Nonetheless, people think that women are not resilient. The Royal Society survey, what was this, 7 years ago, about women, the one I showed you, a male respondent says, women choose to have families, which is a very significant responsibility and not compatible with, with a competitive career as a professional chemist. I told you I was told that when I was trying to do a PhD in 1990, right? 28 years later, people are still saying that. Women face zero discrimination, quite the opposite. Now, last time I looked, maybe that's my biology's a bit old, I thought men had babies too. But nobody would say it's not compatible with a man having a career. And this is the women should argument. You know, if women want to do science, then they should, they should make these choices. Maybe it's the system. This is a great article. I'll leave you to read it. But she says, when a pipeline leaks, we don't blame the water. We fix the pipe. We design the next one to leak less. Why do we blame women who leave the STEM fields? I think it's a great quote. You've heard about it. And she challenges people in this article saying, what can you do? And she challenges particularly senior women who get up there to work harder. And she challenges the men in this world to work harder, to make sure that the system that the women are working is conducive to them staying in it. And so what I have done in my time at Wolfson was to actually work really hard to support research. To build research environments sort of for the people in the college where people with different skills were looking for probably different ways. Research environments will be challenged out of our secure place, where hierarchy, deference, power, knowledge, and wisdom are constantly under scrutiny. And actually, frankly, where we're encouraged to be wrong, where we feel supported enough to come up with a crazy idea and try it. And we'll fail 6 times out of 8, 6 times out of 7, 9 times out of 10. One time we'll be right and we'll change the story. So supporting research at Wolfson, I work with access, getting students in, developing academic skills for all our students, trying to get money for travel and research funds, supporting early career researchers, the postdocs, to find those jobs, to hone their CV, to get the confidence to do that, to disseminate and celebrate science, to support entrepreneurship and building research communities. Because quite frankly, if people in Cambridge aren't being supported and encouraged to do research, well, where the hell is it going to be? Yeah. So my advice to young women everywhere, young people of colour, people coming from a different background into research, you can't have everything. I know you can't have everything. You think carefully about your priorities and adjust your way of life and work to match those priorities. My research group was always small. It got a bit big and I couldn't manage it. I wasn't having any fun and we weren't doing as well. Papers per head, the amount of research we were doing per head. Let's not build an empire. Let's build a team of people that wanted to work together to do well. Because my success was our success. I would have got nowhere without that great group of people. But I think we also need to challenge the norm. There is more than one way to have a successful scientific career, and it doesn't mean you've got to work every Sunday. Challenge the norm. Ask what does success look like to you, to the institution you work in, and to those who work alongside you. Collaborate, 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 collaborate. Learn how and when to say no. It's always a tricky one. We were talking about that just now. Support your group and your colleagues, and they will support you back. My advice to the young people in this room is to build your own brand. Work at that. Think about who you are and what you want. So here's my brand. I'm a world-leading biophysical chemist. teacher, tutor, supervisor, mentor, member of one of the top universities in the world and top chemistry departments in the world. I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a friend, was a daughter for a long time, senior member of the International Community of Scientists, an advocate for science and scientists. But I also got some things. I've been very fortunate to find the jobs I love. And I've been fortunate to find people around me who support me to do that. I don't like the word lucky. That you build, you're fortunate means you look after it. You don't get there just because you're lucky. I was fortunate to have found Alan, but I hope that Alan thinks he was fortunate that I paid that back. They're fortunate to have had me there. So fortune is something you support and build. I was resilient, but I got my resilience through building these support networks. I am determined to enable the next generation. I got determination from my mum. It was my mum in my head when those people were saying, no, you're 40 years old, you can't do it looking after children. I could even hear my mum at my back going, you're not going to let them tell you that, are you? You're really going to tell them you can't do this, Jane? Of course you can't. You're my daughter, of course you can't. And I'm impatient for change. Life is too long to wait. So I challenge you to ask yourselves, who are you? What do you want? How are you going to get it? Are you well prepared? There is absolutely no excuse for going into this ill-prepared. None at all. You even need to be better prepared maybe, but make sure you're well prepared to do it. Think about what the challenges you're going to face. Are there sacrifices you're not prepared to make? If there are, just be realistic. Who can help you? How are you going to find to help you? I do an awful lot of mentoring of young careers. There are people out there who will be there to help you out. Go find them, go ask them, search for them. And then what are you going to do to ensure that you contribute to the success of others? And one really final important piece of advice. Maybe if you go away with nothing, I give this piece of advice at the end of quite a lot of my talks. And somebody wrote to me the other day and said, this is the most important piece of work you ever gave, piece of advice anybody ever gave me. Thank you for having me.